Hello and welcome everyone. In this video I will make scenery glue for your miniatures and terrain scenery. When making terrain or miniature bases, you will need a good adhesive to seal in all your basing materials. And in this video I will make two different recipes. I will make the recipes first and then follow up with a few examples on how to use them. Alright, so we start off with the first recipe, and here are the ingredients. Some 70% alcohol or IPA, distilled water, and finally some matte medium. So let's start off with the alcohol. What I have here is some 70% alcohol or IPA. You can get this in small bottles at a pharmacy and in bigger bottles at an online pharmacy. I wouldn't recommend using 96% alcohol, as I find this to be too aggressive, especially when working with painted surfaces. I start off by mixing equal parts of distilled water to 70% alcohol. Now, depending on where you live, you could probably just use tap water as well, but I personally like to use distilled water just to make sure it's clean. Once that's done, I add 1 part matte medium, which in this case would be 100 milliliters. Now, this particular brand of matte medium is a high quality one, which I am a fan of, but there are a lot of cheaper brands on the market which may save you some money. Next, I will fill the measuring cup with 3 parts of the alcohol water mixture to end up with 400 milliliters total volume. I then give it a good stir and add it to a clean jar with a solid sealable lid. Now, for this recipe you're gonna need some patience, because this needs to be left untouched for 7 to 8 days at least, but the end result is well worth it. During this time, the alcohol will separate the solids from the matte medium. Now, I did a 7-day live stream on this, but should you have missed that event, here's a free sample. So about a week later, I can now carefully pour the liquid in another container and make sure not to shake or stir it. The part that will remain in the jar is basically paint binder. This can sometimes leave a chalky finish on your scenery if it dries too fast and applied too thick. Just as a quick note on matte medium, it can be used as an adhesive, but also for extending acrylic paint. By adding this, I can extend the paint layer, making it more transparent without having to thin it down. If I was to add just water to the paint, the pigments may separate from the paint layer and you may end up having water streaks and little crumbs of pigment. As the word explains it, the matte medium can serve as a matte drying medium between the two. I haven't found any use for this leftover sort of matte medium mozzarella yet, so you can safely throw it out as far as I know. Once I find a use for it, I'll keep you updated. I transfer the mixture to an empty bottle and then put a label on it. And after a long period of thinking, I came up with this original name. What you'll end up with is a very nice flowing light adhesive that will dry with a matte finish. Alright, so on to recipe number 2. First up, I have some PVA or white glue here, and I think it's commonly called Elmer's glue in the US. Some dish detergent and some distilled water. I start off using 1 part PVA glue to this measuring cup. I follow up by adding 3 parts distilled water to the glue. Next up, I will add a teaspoon of dish soap to this mix. Now this particular one is apple flavored and nicely green colored, and this will work absolutely fine. But just to be on the safe side, I would recommend using one without any coloring in it if you can. I then add about a teaspoon of dish detergent to this mix. This will break the surface tension of the water and make it flow a bit better. I will show you this later on in the video. As with the other mixture, I transfer it to an empty bottle and then label it. I'd recommend labeling all your mixtures, as this can become quite confusing once you have a lot of them. Because this matte medium recipe has little solids in it, it's very light and I won't have to shake it up. The PVA mixture on the other hand will slowly separate, so each time you use it you'll have to shake it up or stir it. Alright, so now we got both mixtures at the ready. It's time to do a little demonstration on how to use them with a few examples. So here are some of my miniatures that I based with a foresty type of ground cover. When you're basing miniatures or terrain pieces with scenery like this, your first layer of glue is usually not enough, especially when you're using natural materials such as leaves, rocks and twigs on your scenery. For purpose of the video, I made these 2 bases as an example. I cut them out of MDF board. Now these bases are still a little bit boring, so I add some more color to it in the form of some dried herbs and some mottle leaves. I will just add these in dry and come in with a layer of glue later to seal it all in. First up, here's our matte medium mixture, which I'm going to apply using a pipette. But you could also use the bottle or a spray bottle even. Because of the alcohol, this will flow very easily. The big advantage of this is that it will dry matte and will not darken the scenery as much as the other mixture. Once the glue is applied, I clean off any excess on the sides using a wet sponge. Alright, moving on to the PVA recipe, which I'm going to apply in the same way. This mixture will go on a bit thicker and it may leave a slight glossy finish, which with a foresty type of ground cover like this is no problem. Whereas the alcohol was the flow agent in the previous mixture, here the dish detergent will fulfill that role. To make this flow even better, you could also pre-wet the base, as I will show you later. So once dry, they will end up looking like this. I personally can see the difference as the one on the left is a bit lighter, but with this type of scenery it's very minimal. Now this matte medium recipe is obviously matte drying, so won't have to follow up with a matte varnish. If you want to touch up or seal in already pre-painted bases such as these, this is where the matte medium recipe really shines. Okay, so not really shines because I just said it dries matte, but anyway, you get the picture. Now this is just on a small base, but maybe one day you decide to make something along the lines of this, and with this you could really benefit from having a good finishing adhesive. I made this around 5 years ago and I basically used both recipes of glue on this scenery. Other than a layer of dust, it's pretty much the same as it was then, even with all the natural materials I've used. Alright, so with the forest bases done, let's move on with some other type of scenery. When making desert terrain on miniature bases, you obviously want it to appear dry and not have a glossy surface on it. As with the other scenery, I made a few test bases as an example. Now I already glued this in and painted it after, but let's add something more to this. So let's say there was a sandstorm all of a sudden and I wanted to capture that moment on my bases. Now if I was to come in with a PVA mixture like so, this would happen. Even though this mixture has the dish soap in it, the water drops still have difficulties grabbing onto the sand. So quickly back to the science lab for a second. Here you can see the level of surface tension water has in comparison to alcohol. This reacts basically the same way on your terrain scenery. The way to work around this is to make a mixture out of 2 parts distilled water and 1 part 70% alcohol and then pre-wet it. Now I have done this before using drinkable alcohol, and if you want to do this, pick a relatively clean one and change the ratios to 50% alcohol to water. When I apply the PVA mixture now, it will go through the sand easy. Using the matte medium recipe, I won't have this problem, as this already has a lot of alcohol in it, it will go through easily. Now if I use matte medium as a finishing adhesive, I'm after the adhesive qualities, but in particular the matte finish is what makes it really nice. Alright, as the final example, here I have some static grass. Now with this, you obviously don't want to use a dropper bottle or a pipette, as the drops will flatten everything. So this is also where the matte medium recipe comes in handy. Because this has little solids in it, I can spray it through a fine mister to seal in the grass and give it a matte finish. Alright, so with this, I've shown you the 2 recipes of scenery glue that I usually use. So maybe you have some experiences or good recipes you'd like to share, and feel free to do so in the comments. Alright, so that wraps up this video. I really hope you've enjoyed watching it and that it was of any use to you. As always, thank you for watching, stay tuned for more, and take care.
Work complete.